He thought he was sipping cocktails in Mexico while I cried over an empty casket, unaware that I was preparing a PowerPoint presentation for his funeral that would turn his fake death into a real nightmare. The police officer standing on my rain-slicked porch refused to look me in the eye when he told me my husband had burned to death in a car accident. I spent 3 days planning a funeral for an empty casket, drowning in grief, until my husband's iPad pinged with a notification from the cloud. He wasn't dead. He was in Cabo with his mistress, uploading selfies while I picked out his gravestone. He thought he had pulled off the perfect escape. He didn't know I was about to turn his funeral into his worst nightmare. The knock on the door came at 2 a.m. It's a sound you never forget, heavy, authoritative, and filled with bad news. The cinematic lighting of the scene was stark, the flashing red and blue lights from the squad car cut through the heavy rain, painting my living room walls in violent, shifting colors. I opened the door in my bathrobe, clutching my chest, already knowing that my life was about to shatter. "Mrs. Sterling," the officer asked, rain dripping from the brim of his hat. "I'm afraid there's been an accident. Ideally, we would ask you to identify the body, but the fire was too intense." We found his wallet and his wedding ring near the wreckage. He handed me a plastic evidence bag. Inside was the platinum band I had placed on Ethan's finger 6 years ago. It was charred, soot-stained, but unmistakable. I collapsed. I didn't scream, I just crumbled onto the cold hardwood floor, the world turning into a blur of noise and tears. Ethan was gone. My brilliant, charming, slightly chaotic husband was gone. The next 48 hours were a fugue state of misery. My house filled with people wearing black, whispering in hushed tones, and filling my refrigerator with casseroles I would never eat. My mother flew in. Ethan's brother Mark sat on my couch crying about how much he loved him. He was stressed. Mark sobbed, holding a glass of whiskey. The business, the debts, maybe he was driving too fast. Maybe he was distracted. Debts. Ethan had always been vague about money. Investments, he called them. I trusted him. I was a pediatrician, I saved kids. He managed the portfolio. I assumed we were fine. "We have to plan the service," Mark said gently, putting a hand on my shoulder. "Ideally, Friday. Before the press gets too involved." Friday. 2 days away. I sat in Ethan's home office that night, seeking solace in his scent. The room smelled of cedar and expensive cologne. His desk was messy, covered in papers. I sat in his leather chair and opened his iPad. I just wanted to see his face. Maybe look at photos from our honeymoon. The screen lit up. iCloud backup in progress. I frowned. The iPad was connected to the home Wi-Fi. It was syncing with his phone, but his phone had supposedly melted in the crash. A progress bar crawled across the screen, downloading 5 new items. My heart skipped a beat. Maybe it was a delay. Maybe these were photos he took right before the crash. A final memory? I tapped the Photos app. The newest image popped up. It wasn't a photo of a rainy highway. It wasn't a dashboard. It was a pair of legs, tan, smooth legs resting on a white lounge chair overlooking a turquoise ocean. In the corner of the frame, a hand was holding a tropical drink with a little umbrella. On the wrist was a watch. A Rolex Submariner. My husband's watch. The one he wasn't wearing when he died because he said it was at the jeweler getting clean. I stared at the photo. My brain refused to process it. Grief hallucination, I told myself. This is an old photo. I checked the metadata. Date taken. Today, 4:15 p.m. Location, Cabo San Lucas, Mexico. Today. Ethan was dead. He burned to death on Route 9 2 days ago. How could he be taking photos in Cabo today? I swiped to the next photo. This one was a selfie. Ethan, alive. Healthy. Not a burn mark on him. He was wearing sunglasses and a linen shirt, smiling that charming, crooked smile I loved. And he wasn't alone. Pressed against his cheek was Bella, his 22-year-old executive assistant. The one who had come to my house for Christmas parties. The one who had cried on the phone with me yesterday, saying she was devastated by the news. She was wearing a bikini top and kissing his cheek. The caption, which he had drafted but not yet posted to his secret Instagram account, read, "New life, no looking back." The air left my lungs. The grief that had been crushing me for 2 days evaporated instantly, replaced by a cold, white-hot shock. He wasn't dead. He had faked it. He had staged a crash. He probably stole a car, maybe put a corpse from the morgue in it. God knows what he did, and torched it. He left his ring to sell the lie. Why? I opened his email app. I searched for life insurance. There it was, a policy confirmation from 3 months ago. Beneficiary: Maya Sterling. Payout: $4,000. But wait, if I was the beneficiary, how did that help him? I scrolled down. There was a forwarded email to Mark, his brother. Subject: the plan. Mark, once the payout hits Maya's account, you need to get her to sign the investment trust document. Tell her it's for tax purposes. That transfers the funds to the offshore shell company. Then we split it. She gets the house, we get the cash. I disappear, you get rich. My hand flew to my mouth. Mark, his brother, who was currently sleeping on my couch downstairs, sobbing fake tears. He was in on it. They were going to use my grief to launder $4 million of insurance fraud money, leaving me a widow with a fake memory and eventually an empty bank account. I looked at the iPad. I looked at the picture of Ethan and Bella in Cabo. I looked at the date of the funeral. Friday. Tomorrow. A normal person would call the police. A normal person would scream and wake up the house. But I wasn't feeling normal. I was feeling surgical. I was a doctor. I knew how to cut out a tumor. If I called the police now, Ethan might run. He might disappear from Cabo before they could extradite him. Mark might destroy evidence. No. They wanted a funeral? I would give them a funeral. I checked the guest list on the desk. Mark had invited everyone. Ethan's business partners, our friends, the community. It was going to be a packed house. Mark wanted a big show to make the death look real. He needed witnesses to the tragedy to secure the insurance claim. Perfect. I stood up. I wiped the tears from my face. I walked to the mirror in the hallway. I looked like a wreck. Swollen eyes, pale skin, the perfect grieving widow. I smiled. It was a terrifying expression. I went back to the iPad. I forwarded the photos to my own secure cloud. I downloaded the emails. I screen recorded the location data. Then I put the iPad back exactly where I found it. I walked downstairs. Mark was awake, sitting in the kitchen, eating a slice of leftover lasagna. Maya, he said, jumping up. I didn't hear you come down. Can't sleep? No. I said, my voice raspy. I miss him so much, Mark. Mark walked over and hugged me. It took everything in my power not to vomit. He smelled like betrayal. I know, Mark sighed, patting my back. We all do. But we'll get through this. Tomorrow is the funeral. It will be closure, and then we can handle the finances. I'll help you with the insurance paperwork. Thank you, Mark, I said, pulling away and looking him in the eye. I don't know what I'd do without you. That's what family is for, he smiled. Yes, I said, family. I was thinking, Mark said. For the eulogy, maybe you shouldn't speak. You're too distraught. I can handle it. He didn't want me to speak. He wanted to control the narrative. He wanted a quick, sad service so he could get to the money. No, I said firmly. I want to speak. I have to say goodbye to him properly. Mark hesitated. He looked worried. Are you sure? It's going to be hard. I'm sure, I said. I've been looking through our old photos. It reminded me of everything he really was. I want the world to know the real Ethan. Mark relaxed. He thought I was talking about sentimental memories. Okay, he nodded. That sounds lovely. It will be, I said. Unforgettable. I walked back upstairs to my bedroom. I opened my closet. My black funeral dress was hanging there. It was modest, sad, appropriate. I pushed it aside. Behind it was a red dress. A deep, blood-red dress I had bought for our anniversary but never wore because Ethan said it was too much. I pulled it out. Tomorrow. Everyone expected a weeping widow to stand by an empty casket and cry over a tragedy. Instead, they were going to get a presentation. I sat down at my computer. I opened PowerPoint. Title: The Life and Lies of Ethan Sterling. I dragged the photo of him and Bella in Cabo onto the first slide. I looked at the clock. 3:00 a.m. The funeral was in 7 hours. Mark was sleeping downstairs, dreaming of his millions. Ethan was in Mexico, dreaming of his new life. They thought I was the victim. They thought I was the mark. They forgot that before I was a wife, I was the girl who graduated top of her class in anatomy. I knew exactly where to stick the knife to cause the most pain. I started typing my eulogy. It wasn't going to be a rest in peace. It was going to be a burn in hell. Mark screamed that the photos were deepfakes. But when I opened the casket to reveal sandbags instead of a body, the police waiting in the back of the church made their move. I walked into the church wearing a blood-red dress while everyone else wore black. My brother-in-law thought I had lost my mind with grief, whispering to the guests that I was having a breakdown. He didn't know that the laptop I was clutching contained the photos of my dead husband drinking margaritas in Cabo with his mistress, taken yesterday. The funeral was supposed to be their victory lap. I was about to turn it into a crime scene. The heavy oak doors of St. Jude's Cathedral creaked open, breaking the somber silence of the packed sanctuary. 300 heads turned in unison. The visual contrast was violent. The pews were a sea of mourning charcoal and black, creating a dark, oppressive atmosphere smelling of stale incense and lilies, the smell of death. And then there was me. I stood in the doorway, framed by the gray, rainy light from outside. My dress was a deep, vibrant crimson, tailored to perfection. I wasn't wearing a veil. My makeup was sharp, my lips painted a matching shade of red. I didn't look like a widow, I looked like an avenging angel. A gasp rippled through the crowd. It started at the back and rolled forward like a wave. "Oh my God," I heard Mrs. Gable whisper. "Has she snapped?" Mark, who was standing near the altar next to the closed mahogany casket, a casket filled with sandbags or bricks, I assumed, froze mid-handshake with the priest. His face went pale. He hurried down the aisle toward me, his movements jerky and panicked. "Maya," he hissed, grabbing my arm a little too tightly. "What are you doing? You're wearing red? Everyone is staring. You look insane." "I'm celebrating his life, Mark," I said, my voice calm and loud enough for the first few rows to hear. Ethan always hated black. He said it was depressing. I wanted to give him a send-off he'd never forget. Mark scanned my face, looking for the hysteria he expected. He didn't find it. He found something colder. "Okay," he stammered, trying to steer me toward the front pew. "Okay, just sit down, keep it together. We need to get through this for the insurance. For Ethan." I sat in the front row, directly in front of the lie. The casket was polished to a high shine, draped in white flowers. A framed photo of Ethan, looking handsome and trustworthy, sat on top of it. The service began. The priest droned on about the fragility of life, about fire and ash. It was nauseating. Then, Mark went up to give the eulogy. He stood at the podium, gripping the sides with white knuckles. He summoned tears on command. Ethan was more than a brother. Mark choked out, looking at the ceiling theatrically. He was a visionary. He worked so hard for his family. He loved Maya more than anything in this world. His last thoughts were surely of her. I watched him lie. I watched him manipulate 300 grieving people. I watched him lay the groundwork for stealing $4 million from me. My hand rested on my laptop bag. And now Mark wiped his eyes, stepping back. "My sister-in-law Maya would like to share a few words. Please bear with her. She is deeply affected." He looked at me with a warning in his eyes. "Don't screw this up." I stood up. The red dress rustled, the only sound in the cavernous room. I walked up the marble steps to the pulpit. I didn't bring notes. I brought my MacBook. "Thank you, Mark," I said into the microphone. My voice didn't tremble. "You're right. I am deeply affected. Ethan was full of surprises. Even in death, he continues to surprise me." I placed the laptop on the podium. I pulled out the HDMI cable that was meant for the In Loving Memory slideshow Mark had prepared. I plugged it in. The giant projection screen behind the altar flickered to life. "I wanted to share some final memories of Ethan," I said. "Memories that truly capture his spirit." I hit the space bar. Slide 1. The photo of Ethan's legs in Cabo. The blue water, the drink, the Rolex. The crowd murmured confusedly. "Is that from their honeymoon?" Someone whispered. This photo, I narrated, my voice cutting through the confusion, was taken yesterday. At 4:15 p.m. I hit the spacebar again. Slide 2. The metadata. Zoomed in. Date yesterday. Location, Cabo, San Lucas. The murmurs turned into a buzz. Mark took a step forward from the side of the stage. Maya? What is this? Turn it off. I was confused too, I continued, ignoring him. Because the police told me Ethan burned to death on Route 9 2 days ago. But here he is, yesterday, enjoying the sunset. I hit the spacebar again. Slide 3. The selfie. Ethan's face, clear as day, smiling. With Bella, his assistant, kissing his cheek. The caption visible on the screen, new life, no looking back. The church erupted. It wasn't a gasp this time, it was a roar. People stood up. Chairs scraped. That's Bella, someone shouted. That's his assistant. He's alive. Mrs. Gable shrieked. Mark rushed the podium. Technical difficulties. She's having a breakdown. Cut the feed. He lunged for my laptop. I pulled it away and grabbed the microphone stand, wielding it like a weapon. Sit down, Mark. I screamed, my voice booming through the speakers with such force that he actually flinched back. I'm not done. I looked at the crowd. They were frozen, caught between horror and fascination. My husband isn't in that box. I pointed to the casket. That box is empty. He faked his death to claim $4 million in life insurance because he gambled away our savings. I hit the spacebar one last time. Slide 4. The email from Ethan to Mark. Subject. The plan. Mark, once the payout hits Maya's account, tell her it's for tax purposes. I disappear. You get rich. The text was 10 feet tall. Everyone could read it. Mark froze. He looked at the screen. He looked at the crowd. He looked at the priest who was crossing himself repeatedly. The charade was over. You know, it's funny how the smallest details can unravel everything. You think you have a handle on things, then one misplaced word, one lingering glance, and the whole meticulously constructed facade just crumbles. You know, I turned to Mark, my voice dropping to a lethal whisper. You sat on my couch, ate my food, and cried fake tears while your brother was sipping Mai Tais? You were going to let me bury an empty box and then rob me blind? Mark looked like a trapped animal. He was sweating profusely. It's out of context. Mark stammered, his voice high and pathetic. She's crazy. Those are deep fakes. AI generated. Is the police report I just filed AI generated? I asked. At that moment, the heavy oak doors at the back of the church opened again. This time, it wasn't a grieving widow. It was 4 police officers. I had called them an hour before the service. I told them I had received proof of life and evidence of insurance fraud. I told them the accomplice was at the church. Mark Sterling, the lead officer, shouted, walking down the center aisle. Mark looked at the side exit. He thought about running. Don't even think about it, I said into the mic. Mark slumped. His legs gave out. He sat down on the steps of the altar, right next to the empty casket. The officers marched up the aisle, past the stunned mourners who were now filming everything on their phones. Maya, please. Mark wept as the officers grabbed his arms. He made me do it. Ethan made me. I didn't want to. Save it for the judge, Mark, I said. They cuffed him, right there in front of the crucifix. As they dragged him away, the church was chaotic. People were shouting, crying, taking pictures of the screen. I stood alone at the podium. I looked at the empty casket. I walked over to it. With a swift motion, I unlatched the lid. Mark had tried to stop me, but nobody stopped me now. I threw the lid open. Sandbags. Just as I suspected. 3 heavy canvas sandbags resting on the white satin pillow. The crowd gasped again. The final proof. I reached into the casket. I picked up the framed photo of Ethan that was resting on top of the sandbags. I looked at his smiling, treacherous face. I turned to the camera that was live streaming the service for out-of-town relatives. Ethan, I said, looking directly into the lens. I know you're watching. You always were a narcissist you couldn't resist watching your own funeral. I held the photo up. The police are contacting the Mexican authorities right now. They have your location. They have your alias. And they have your brother. I dropped the photo into the casket, onto the sandbags. "Enjoy the margarita," I said. "It's the last one you'll ever have." I slammed the casket lid shut. Bang. The sound echoed through the church like a gunshot. I picked up my laptop, I smoothed my red dress, and I walked back down the aisle, head held high, through the parting sea of black-clad mourners. I didn't shed a tear. I didn't look back. I had a plane to catch. Because the police moved slow, and I wanted to be there when they put the cuffs on my husband. He begged me on his knees to save him from Mexican prison, but I looked down at him and said, "My husband died in a car crash on Tuesday. I don't know who you are." The tropical sun of Cabo San Lucas beat down on the tarmac as I stepped off the plane, but I didn't feel the heat. I was running on cold, pure adrenaline. While the guests back home were likely still picking their jaws up off the church floor, I was in a taxi speeding toward the coastline, tracking the GPS signal of a dead man. Ethan thought he had bought a ticket to paradise with stolen money. He didn't realize he had actually booked a front-row seat to his own destruction. The resort was called Las Ventanas. It was the kind of place where the nightly rate cost more than my mortgage payment, money that Ethan had siphoned from our joint accounts while telling me we were broke. The cinematic contrast between my reality and his was nauseating. I had spent the last 3 days crying over an empty grave. He had spent them getting a tan. I walked through the open-air lobby. The ocean breeze smelled of salt and expensive sunscreen. I wasn't wearing my red funeral dress anymore. I was wearing a white linen suit and sunglasses, looking like just another wealthy tourist. But under the jacket, my heart was hammering against my ribs like a war drum. I approached the front desk. I didn't need to ask for his room number. I had the geolocation data from the photos. Villa 4. The Infinity Suite. I walked down the winding stone path, flanked by palm trees and blooming hibiscus. The sound of crashing waves grew louder. I reached the heavy wooden door of Villa 4. It wasn't locked. Why would it be? They were in paradise. They thought they were untouchable. I pushed the door open and walked into the private courtyard. The scene was picture perfect. An infinity pool blended seamlessly with the ocean horizon. A bucket of ice with a bottle of Dom Perignon sat on a teak table. And there they were. Ethan was lying on a lounge chair, shirtless, wearing those expensive sunglasses he swore he lost last year. He looked healthy, vibrant, not a scratch on him. Bella was in the pool, leaning on the edge, laughing at something he said. She looked young, carefree, and expensive. Today Sunday do a lockswear foods. To Mark, Ethan said, raising his glass. For handling the weeping widow. I felt a surge of rage so powerful, it almost blinded me. He wasn't just alive, he was mocking my grief. He was celebrating my pain. I stepped out from the shadows of the bougainvillea. Actually, I said, my voice cutting through the sound of the ocean. Mark is a little tied up right now. Handcuffs, I believe. Ethan dropped his glass. It shattered on the stone deck, shards of crystal and expensive champagne exploding everywhere. He scrambled backward on the lounge chair, nearly falling off. He whipped his sunglasses off, blinking rapidly, staring at me as if I were a ghost. "Maya," he choked out. His face drained of color, leaving his tan looking like dirty makeup. No, you're in New York." Bella screamed. She backed away into the water, covering herself as if my gaze physically burned her. "Ethan, you said she wouldn't find us. You said she was stupid." "I am a lot of things, Bella," I said, walking closer, my heels clicking on the stone. "But stupid isn't one of them. Did you really think you could upload photos to the cloud from a shared account and I wouldn't notice? Did you think I wouldn't recognize my husband's legs?" Ethan stood up. He was shaking. He looked at the gate, then at me. He tried to summon his old charm, the charm that had fooled me for 6 years. "Babe," he said, holding his hands up, taking a step toward me. "Babe, listen, it's not what it looks like. I was in trouble. The cartels, the debts, I had to do this to protect you. If I stayed, they would have killed us both." "Save it, Ethan," I said, crossing my arms. "I saw the emails to Mark. I disappear, you get rich. There were no cartels, just your gambling addiction and a greed so deep it rotted your soul. We can fix this," Ethan pleaded, sweat beading on his forehead. "Look, the money hasn't transferred yet, right? We can split it. You, me, and Bella." 3 ways. $4 million, Maya. Think about it. You can stay here. We can start over. 3 ways, I laughed. It was a cold, sharp sound. You want me to share stolen insurance money with the mistress you're sleeping with? She's just. Ethan looked at Bella, then back at me, calculating his odds. She means nothing to me, Maya. I can send her home. It's always been you. You pig. Bella shrieked from the pool. You told me you hated her. You told me she was boring and frigid. Shut up, Bella. Ethan roared. He turned back to me, his eyes wild. He realized the charm wasn't working. He realized I wasn't the crying wife anymore.
Can't prove anything.
Ethan sneered, his demeanor shifting instantly from begging to threatening. I'm in Mexico. U.S. laws don't apply here. Even if you call the police, extradition takes years. I'll be gone by tonight. You came all this way for nothing. He reached for his phone on the table. I wouldn't do that, I said. Watch me. He unlocked his phone. I'm transferring the funds right now. The funds are frozen, Ethan, I said. Mark was arrested 2 hours ago. The FBI froze the accounts. And as for Mexico, I pointed to the cliff overlooking the villa. You really should have checked the extradition treaty updates. Ethan looked up. At the top of the cliff, silhouetted against the bright sun, were 4 figures. Uniformed figures. They weren't hotel security. They were federales. Mexican federal police. I had spent the plane ride coordinating with the U.S. consulate and the local authorities. Insurance fraud is a crime, but faking your death to evade debt and entering Mexico under a false passport? That got their attention. No, Ethan whispered. No. The officers began to descend the stairs into the villa, their hands resting on their holsters. Ethan looked at the pool. He looked at the ocean drop-off. He had nowhere to go. Maya, please. He fell to his knees. The stone scraped his skin. Don't let them take me. Mexican prison, I won't survive. I'm your husband. My husband died in a car accident on Tuesday, I said, looking down at him. I buried him this morning. I don't know who you are. The officers reached him. They didn't use gentle hands. They yanked him up, twisting his arms behind his back. Click. The handcuffs gleamed in the sunlight. Bella was climbing out of the pool, shivering, trying to grab a towel. An officer grabbed her arm. Wait! I didn't do anything, she cried. I'm just the girlfriend. Except to fraud, I corrected. As they dragged Ethan past me, he stopped. He looked me in the eyes. The arrogance was gone. He looked small. Pathetic. Why didn't you just divorce me? He asked, tears mixing with his sweat. Because you wanted to win, Ethan, I whispered. You wanted the money, the girl, and the freedom. You wanted to leave me with nothing but a grave to visit. I leaned in close. Now, the only thing you'll be visiting is a cell, and the only thing I'll be spending is your money. The officers shoved him forward. I watched them drag him up the stairs, his bare feet stumbling on the stone. The guests in the neighboring villas were watching, phones out, recording the downfall of the man who thought he could outsmart death. I turned back to the view. The ocean was beautiful. I walked over to the table where the champagne bottle sat. It was still half full. I picked up Bella's glass. I poured the warm champagne onto the ground. Then, I picked up the bottle and walked into the villa to find the phone. I needed to call my mother. I needed to tell her the funeral was a success. But first, I needed to book a flight home. I had a lot of paperwork to do, and I had a red dress to dry clean. I walked out of the villa, leaving the shattered glass and the ruined paradise behind me. The widow was dead. Long live the wife. He whispered the location of the hidden gold to buy my silence, unaware that I would walk straight to the FBI agent outside and hand him the keys to my husband's coffin. 6 months later, I sat in the front row of a federal courtroom, watching the man I once vowed to love forever get shackled by a U.S. Marshal. Ethan's tan from Cabo had faded into a sickly prison pallor, and the arrogance that fueled his fake death was replaced by the desperate, twitchy energy of a cornered rat. He had tried to play God with our lives, but today, the gavel was about to come down, and I was the one holding the hammer. The extradition process had been a media circus. The Cabo corpse headline ran on every news station for weeks. I became an unwilling celebrity, the lady in red who crashed her own husband's funeral. Ethan sat at the defense table next to a court-appointed lawyer who looked exhausted. Mark, his brother and accomplice, had already taken a plea deal. He had sung like a canary, giving the feds everything: the offshore accounts, the fake passports, the insurance fraud scheme. Mark got 5 years. Ethan was facing 20, but he had one card left to play, or so he thought. The judge called a recess before sentencing. Ethan turned around. He locked eyes with me. He didn't look remorseful. He looked calculating. He mouthed one word: visit. I met him in the holding cell during the break. The cinematic lighting was harsh fluorescent white, buzzing overhead like a trapped fly. Ethan sat on the other side of the plexiglass. He looked smaller than I remembered. "You look good, Maya," he said into the phone receiver. "Red suits you." I always said that. "You said it was too much," I reminded him, my voice flat. "What do you want, Ethan?" "I have a lunch reservation. I have something the feds didn't find," he whispered, leaning closer to the glass. His eyes darted around to make sure the guard wasn't listening. Before the crash, before Cabo, I buried it. Physical assets, gold, diamonds, crypto cold storage. It's worth another $2 million, untraceable. I raised an eyebrow. And it's yours," he said. "All of it. If you stand up there during the victim impact statement and ask for leniency, tell the judge I was under duress. Tell him I had a mental break. If you cry, if you play the loving wife one last time, maybe I get 10 years instead of 20. And you get $2 million, tax-free." He smiled, that same charming, crooked smile that had made me fall in love with him in med school. He really thought he could still manipulate me. He thought greed was a universal language. $2 million, I repeated. "It's in the storage unit," he said quickly, sensing my interest. "The one under your maiden name. I kept a key taped under the dashboard of your car. The old Honda. Remember?" I stared at him. I remembered the Honda. I remembered the storage unit we rented years ago to store my medical school books. I hadn't been there in a decade. "You hid stolen money in my storage unit," I asked. "So if the feds found it, I would go to jail." Ethan's smile faltered. "I knew you'd never check it. It was safe. Maya, please, just help me. We were a team once." "We were," I said. "Until you decided to incinerate our marriage." I stood up. "Where are you going?" Ethan panicked. "Do we have a deal?" I looked at him through the glass, the man who faked his death, the man who cheated on me, the man who tried to frame me for his contingency plan. "No, Ethan," I said. "We don't have a deal, but thank you for the tip." I hung up the phone. I walked out of the holding area and straight over to the lead FBI agent standing by the water fountain. "Agent Miller," I said, "you might want to get a warrant for a storage facility on 4th Street. Unit 302. My husband just confessed to hiding undeclared assets there." Ethan watched through the small window of the door as I pointed at him and talked to the agent. He saw the agent nod and get on his radio. Ethan screamed. It was silent behind the soundproof glass, but I saw his face contort in pure, impotent rage. He slammed his fist against the wall. He realized, finally, that he hadn't just lost the game. He had handed me the scoreboard. An hour later, the sentencing resumed. I stood at the podium for my victim impact statement. I didn't cry. I didn't ask for leniency. "Your Honor," I said, looking at the judge, "Ethan Sterling didn't just commit fraud against an insurance company. He committed fraud against a life. He stole my grief. He weaponized my love. He made me mourn a man who was laughing on a beach." I looked at Ethan. He was staring at the table, defeated. "He thinks he is smarter than everyone in this room," I continued. "But arrogance is a heavy anchor, and today, I hope it drags him to the bottom." The judge nodded. "Ethan Sterling," the judge said, "I sentence you to 25 years in federal prison without the possibility of parole. Additionally, all assets recovered from the storage unit on 4th Street are hereby seized." The gavel banged. Ethan didn't look up as they led him away. He was a ghost again. But this time, the death was real. His life as a free man was over. 3 months later, I stood on the balcony of my new apartment. I had sold the big house. It had too many shadows. I sold Ethan's car. I sold everything that reminded me of him. I used the money from selling the Sterling estate, which I legally acquired after the divorce was finalized in record time due to his conviction to start a scholarship fund for medical students. I held a glass of wine, not champagne, never champagne anymore, and looked at the city lights. My phone buzzed. It was an email from an auction house. Subject: Item 45, sold. Dear Maya, we are pleased to inform you that the red funeral dress has sold at the charity auction for $15,000. Proceeds have been transferred to the Fraud Victims Alliance. I smiled. The dress that Mark called insane had just helped a dozen people get back on their feet. I walked inside and closed the balcony door. On my desk sat a single framed photo. It wasn't of Ethan, it was of me, standing at the podium in the church, wearing that red dress, pointing at the screen. It was a reminder. Not of the tragedy, but of the moment I stopped being a victim and started being the author of my own story. Ethan faked his death to run away. I showed up at his funeral to make sure he stayed buried. And now, I was finally alive. If you loved this story of justice, hit that like button, subscribe, and tell me in the comments what color would you wear to your ex's funeral. Thanks for watching.